بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. في البداية أحب أسلم عليكم وأحييكم معنا في جزء من محاضرات مؤسسة الكويت للتقدم العلمي من ضمن برامجها بالExecutive Education. On behalf of the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Sciences, I would like to welcome you all to our speaker event series. We are pleased to have the Professor Eric Ulhmann, who is a faculty member and a professor of organizational development and behavior within INSEAD. He will give you an insight and hopefully give you an engaging experience, mostly interactive. As you can see, there's a lot of papers in front of you. But hopefully this is a good insight towards ethical leadership and the topic of moral judgment and how you can actually think about as a leader within your own organization. And also I would like to thank the Kuwait Economic Society for hosting the event at their premises. As always, such a welcome hospitality from their end, so thank you. And without further ado, Professor Eric, please, you can
Yes, thank you, Professor. I'll just give you a 5-minute introductory. نشكر كيفاس أجن حق تعاونكم، إن شاء الله لمزيد من التعاون معاكم والدكتور بسام الفيلي. نشكر حضورك وإن شاء الله يعني we're looking forward for more things and hosting things more هنا at Kuwait Economic Society. I'll speak in Arabic. Professor Eric متخصص في علم الاجتماع والبيهيفير والسلوكي. هو من مؤسسة جامعة إنسياد. جامعة إنسياد عريقة، تأسست في 1957. إنسياد تأسست برأس مال من غرفة تجارة باريس، وعندهم 3 فروع رئيسية. طبعا الرئيسي في باريس، ومن ثم عندنا بسنغافورة، وعندهم أبو ظبي. يقدمون بس برامج ما بعد الجامعة، فبس دراسات عليا MBA Executive MBA و PhD. والحين ما شاء الله العالم كله متجه على السلوك المؤسسي والسلوك الموظفين والسلوك البيهيفير مالت الكونسيومر اللي هو المستهلك. فوايد راح نشوف شلون تأثير البيهيفير مال الليدرز قائدين المؤسسات وشلون هذا يأثر على المؤسسات. I leave the floor for Professor Eric. Please, it's all yours now.
All right. Thanks so much. It's a huge pleasure and honor to be here. I'm Eric Ulhmann. I'm a professor of organizational behavior at INSEAD. We're going to have a relatively short time together, but I hope we can have an enjoyable and interactive time together. And what I'd like to do now is to organize you into groups of companies. So the folks who are seated very close by to you will be another company. All right. So each of you, you have a role in front of you on your seats if you're towards the front. If you're in the back, I'll bring you some roles. So please take a few minutes to read those, and I'm going to assign one person from each group to be the leader of the group, who will hand in your group decisions to me each round of the game that we're about to play. So please take a few minutes and read the papers that are in front of you. If you have a paper in front of you, if you're in the back, I'm going to come back to you and bring you roles to read. All right, so we should have 7 companies in 2 markets. So there's the W market on this side, and there's the E market on this side. All right? So hopefully, unless we had some attrition, we should have 7 companies on each side. All right, so let's get started with the oil pricing case. All right, so just to explain, all of this is also in your roles. But I'm going to also explain it verbally, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. It looks complicated, but it's actually quite simple. So this is the oil market exercise. The way it's going to work is that each round, each company will decide the number of units of oil that you want to release into the market, right? We'll have 11 rounds or 11 days. So each round, I'll declare the round. We're in round 1, 2, 3, etc. And then for each round, your company, whether you're W1 or E3 or whatever your number is in letter R, you need to decide, am I going to release 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 units of oil into the market. You use your submission sheet to tell me your decision. So each company leader has this. And then for each round, so for example, for round 1, you would write your company's number, say E1, for example, which would be in the front. And then you just put a number between 0 and 10. That's all you have to do each round. Now, your decision each round is fully anonymous, so no one will ever know what your company decided. If you decided to play 5, 7, 10, 3, whatever you decided, that will always and forever be confidential, and I will throw away your decision sheets after this lecture. So it'll always be anonymous. However, I am going to reveal something to the group, which is the total number of units of oil in the W market and then also in the East market. So no one will know your individual company's decision, but everybody will know the total amount of oil that's in the market. For now, I'm not allowing any speaking to the other companies, so you can't talk to people in the row behind you or in the rows to the side, only to other people seated right next to you who are in your role. I also want to emphasize that for the oil game, your goal is absolute, not relative profit. So you're not trying to drive anybody else out of the market. You're not trying to get a relative advantage in comparison to someone else. You're just focused on generating the most absolute value you possibly can for your company. So absolute value, not relative value, is your goal. Now, as you've probably surmised already, and as is described in each of your roles, you can do better, the best collectively, if you cooperate. So if you all adhere to your original agreement, your informal agreement with the other companies within the W market and within the E market, that you're all going to release 5 units per round, that'll maximize the total profitability of the market, right? You capture the most total value to be divided between the 7 companies in market W and then the 7 companies in market E. However, that agreement is not enforceable. It's not a binding legal agreement, and there's no overarching entity like a government or any other kind of authority to oblige you to play 5. It's entirely up to you whether you play 0, 5, 7, 10, 3, or what have you, and it's fully anonymous, right? Any questions about this? If you choose to cooperate and all play 5, you'll maximize total profits in your market, right? However, you can do better as an individual if everyone else in your market plays 5 and then you choose to play 10. So if everybody else cooperates, but you defect on the rest of the market, you'll make abnormal profits, right? This might be familiar to some of you. I see some folks smiling. This is a classic social dilemma situation. If we all work together within the market, we maximize our value, but each individual has a strong incentive to defect. Cooperation is playing 5, and defection is playing 10. Any questions about this? No? Okay, I think folks are following just fine. Great, all right, we went through a little bit quickly, but I hope that's understandable, right? This figure, which is also in your roles, makes this really quite clear, right? So if one company puts out more than 5 units while the others put out only 5, the company that releases more oil will make abnormal profits, will capture superior value for that round. However, if all of the companies put out more than 5 units, and especially if all put 10, you end up with very low value for everybody, right? So classic social dilemma situation. All right, so with that, just take a minute and chat with the folks in the seats right next to you, and then your company leader, I'm gonna come down the row, you don't need to get out of your seats. I'm gonna come down the row, just raise your hand when you're ready, and the company leader should give me your submission sheet for round 1, with a number between 0 and 10 written on it. So all I need from each leader is just only round 1. Don't need to get out of your seats, I'll come to you. Let's take a few minutes to discuss within your group, and then I'll come down the rows. This is only for round 1. You're only playing round 1 right now. You don't need to decide the future rounds yet.
We'll know the results of round 1?
Yeah, so you'll know the total number of units released across all 7 companies in market E and in market W for round 1. But I'm not going to reveal what any individual company decided.
How many companies there are?
So there's 7, unless folks have left. By original design, there were 7 companies in the Western market, the W market over there, and then 7 more here in the East market. And your company E1, I think. E1. Yes, E1. Okay. Yes, questions? Huh? Oh, you're ready. Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's anonymous, so I'll copy. Okay. All right. Once you're ready, raise your hand. All right. So now I will, as promised, I will reveal the total number of units in each of the markets, but not what any individual company decided. All right, so for round one, we also have to adjust this a little bit because some of the companies seem to have gone out of business. So we don't have quite as many companies as originally envisioned, but that's all right. This case should still work. All right, so in the Eastern market, we have 32 units in the market, and then we would have expected 30. So in parentheses, I'll put would have been the, we'll call that the cooperative agreement. All right, so a little bit more than a cooperative equilibrium. All right, and then in the Western market, we have 26. Also, just a little bit more than what a cooperative agreement would be, which would be 25. All right, so again, this is the total for each market, not what any individual company decided. Some folks defected and played more, right? Yeah. But we don't know, you don't know who. All right, with that, let's move on to round two. So quickly confer within your group, and then raise your hand when your team leader is ready to turn in your decision sheet for round two.
Yeah, because we're running out of time, and I'm afraid that we didn't go into, we're half an hour now down.
Sorry?
So if we just could take a random number, and we'll put it as the case it is. So someone would scream out from here, calculated it, and someone from there, just to speed up, because we didn't go into the topic yet.
Please let me continue with the case. That doesn't work for the sessions. Yeah, thanks. Let's please play round two. Raise your hand when you're ready to turn in your result. All right. So whenever you're ready, please raise your hand for round two. Time is of the essence. Oh, thank you. Great. Make decisions quickly for round two. Another. Raise your hand if you have a submission. Your units per round. We have a hand. All right. So in market E, we now have 33 units of oil for round two. And then for W1, we have sorry. And for the second market, W, we have 27. So it's actually gone a little bit away from cooperation relative to the first round. So just as a spoiler, we're not going to play 11 rounds of this game. The point is to illustrate something fundamental about human interaction, right? So why do you think it is that you didn't reach perfect cooperation? Why didn't everybody just play 5? Yeah. Greed, right? Individualism, right, would be the nicer way of putting it, right? So, according to classic game theory, right, individual rationality means doing whatever's best for you, either in the short run or the long, right? So in this particular situation, the rational thing to do from a game theoretic perspective, right, the dominant strategy, if you will, is to defect on the others and to not cooperate or to play more. Actually, I'm quite surprised how close you all were to actually reaching a cooperative equilibrium, although you see that between rounds 1 and 2, it actually moved in the wrong direction. How many of you have heard of the classic prisoner's dilemma situation? I think this is sort of this classic dilemma. Suppose two folks who committed a crime together are caught by the police and they're put into separate interrogation rooms. And they each have to decide whether or not to confess, right? If neither of them confesses, right, if neither of them confesses, they'll each get short jail terms, right? But if one person confesses and the other does not, the person who confesses on the other will then get lenient treatment, whereas the person who fails to confess when their partner did confess will go to jail for an extremely long time. Right? And so thinking about it in terms of game theory is very interested in what is my dominant strategy as an individual player, right? So suppose we're the two prisoners, and suppose I don't know what you're going to do, but supposing you were to confess, what should I do? Yeah. If you were to confess, I should, but if I don't confess, well then I'm going to go to jail forever because you told the police all about what we did. right? So if you confess, then I should confess, right? But then suppose you don't confess, what should I do?
Don't.
No, I should, from an individual rationality point of view, I should confess. If I'm a loyal friend, I won't confess. We'll stay together, right? And we'll get to that in a second. But my dominant strategy is a purely rational individual, setting loyalty aside, setting ethics aside, although we're criminals, so we already set ethics aside. But setting loyalty aside, I should confess regardless of what you do. So that's an example of what's called a dominant strategy, right? Another important concept in game theory is what's called a Nash equilibrium, right? So that's a scenario where nobody is tempted to pursue an individual self-interest that departs from the well-being of the community, right? So it's typically, no matter, the reason we only played 2 rounds, 11 was never the plan, is that no matter how many rounds you play, it's very hard to reach a stable situation where everybody plays 5. And the reason is that there's always some temptation for everyone, whether they pursue it or not, to play more than 5, right? Especially if everyone else is playing 5. I can make radical abnormal profits by playing 10, so the temptation is actually stronger to defect on cooperative partners. I'm even better off confessing if I'm pretty sure that you are not going to confess. Right? So according to game theory then, right? Folks, organizations, communities, right? Societies should essentially fall apart, right? Meaning that how could society work? How could society function and succeed, right? If economic game theory was right? There must be some conditions in which people will cooperate, right? So think a little bit about this. What do you think are some of the conditions that would promote a cooperative situation? Yeah. That's right. So if you were allowed to talk and appeal to one another and persuade, right? Or appeal to shared identities, for example, you would tend to get more cooperation. If we'd had a little bit more time, I would have had you try to persuade each other, and that usually has some effect, but still, it's still hard to reach that equilibrium, right? Because everyone is still tempted. What else could you do to promote a cooperative community? A pro-social community, if you will. Sorry? Regulation, right? Absolutely, right? And this is what game theory stipulates, is that because we're not in an equilibrium in these sorts of situations, this is why we need to have a government, right? And this is also why, you're not going to find a lot of situations in which a precious natural resource like oil is totally unregulated in this manner, right? Another common scenario in decision making is a tragedy of the common scenario, right? So suppose we're all fisher people and we're fishing from the same lake. We're all best off limiting our fishing so that the number of fish, the population is sustainable, right? But we're individually best off overfishing, right? I can make more money for myself at the fish market if I fish a lot more fish than my share and you fish your regular share. Right? So one of the solutions there is, let's just get a patrol boat to go around the river with some folks with some formidable folks on that boat, right? And then if somebody fishes too much, they get arrested or they get a giant fine, or we create a disincentive. Then it becomes individually irrational to fish more because there's a good chance that I'm going to get punished, right? So is that the answer then? Just governments and monitoring and regulation? I think that's part of it. But what else can we do to promote a cooperative community? We can communicate each other, but what would we say?
For the sake of our future.
Yeah, you could try to create, exactly, a future orientation. There's some very influential work in decision making on cooperating with the future, which is not really individually rational, because these are folks who will live their lives after mine is ended, right? And yet people do it, right? Are there things we can do to promote cooperation? Would it help if we were all from the same group or had some shared experiences, or let's say we were relatives, right? So it is true, human societies do need governments and regulatory agencies, right? And law enforcement, right? And regulations, right? But there's so much more to it than that. Have any of you heard of the economist Elinor Ostrom? So she's nerd famous. She's famous among academics, right? So she looked to see what would happen in communities where monitoring is very difficult. So she looked at a lot of indigenous communities around the world, right? That did have some sort of precious resource like a lake, for example, and did have a strong individual temptation to steal and had very weak governance, right? So this community doesn't have folks, or not enough folks, going around policing everybody, right? This is a small indigenous community, right? And what she showed again and again is that by and large, the predictions of game theory are not supported, right? In a lot of early, relatively small scale human societies, right? Most societies that manage to survive and persist and perpetuate themselves manage to reach a cooperative equilibrium despite all of the temptations that game theory outlines, right? So what are some of the things a community can do? Right, yeah, reputation-based, right? So the more public it is, right? So if you all knew how many units of oil each of you are releasing into the market each round, right? Then the shame of being the one who defected and was greedy, at least in the eyes of some, and rational in the eyes of economic theory, but greedy in the eyes of the community and took more. Everybody looking nasty at you and not liking you very much, right? Human beings are social creatures, right? We would be more likely to play five, right? Right? Although I think economic theory, game theory would be aligned with that because it would say, yes, it's less rational because if folks don't like you, they don't want to cooperate and partner with you in other sorts of contexts, right? Eleanor Ostrom has also extended her work to look at private companies, right? So she's also shown the same kinds of factors that help small-scale societies reach cooperative equilibriums despite a lack of governance also help private organizations be successful and profitable, right? So these are things like fair processes, right? A sense of shared identity. Regular people having a sense of inclusion in decision-making, or a sense that my leaders care about me and are looking after my best interests. So the same things that predict small-scale societies flourishing and reaching cooperative equilibriums also predict the profitability of businesses, right? So game theory is an important part of creating positive pro-social environments, right? And it's also a part of creating profitable companies. And a lot of this has to do with the kinds of norms and standards that leaders set, right? It's a job of everybody in an organization to create that pro-social climate, right? But it's especially that of leaders. Leaders lead by example, and you have these trickle-down effects from the behavior of leaders. Leaders also play an outsized role in establishing processes, right? So whether there's fair process in place, whether people feel that their voice is listened to and their well-being is taken into account. Right? So these are all of the factors that play in to leadership. Any questions about this? Cooperative communities? Yeah.
Responsible of enforcing these or this vision?
So in the sense of governance, it would be some sort of, it's the guys on the boat, right, who are patrolling the lake, right? So it would be essentially some sort of law enforcement type mechanism, right? But there's other kinds of laws that human societies have, right, which is more based on informal norms, right? The fact that people won't like me, or I've been socialized with a strong sense of identity and I'll feel bad about myself. I'll have a negative utility because I overfished and I know that you're not going to have enough, or future generations won't have enough, right? I think it's the job of everyone, whether a leader or a follower, to build these sorts of positive climates, right? But there's more power in the hand, therefore more responsibility in the hands of folks who are relatively higher in the hierarchy. Oops. Yeah, so here I would say, for certain kinds of resources, I think it is the job of the government, right? There's a reason why the scenario in oil markets, right, where you have private companies making all the decisions about precious natural resources that drive the whole economy. Like, there's a reason why that's not typically done, right? So for certain kinds of things, especially shared natural resources where every person in the country has a legitimate claim, I think the government. Now, within a private company, I think outside of the bounds of the law, here we're talking more just about the community of the company. I think the leader of the company leader and leaders of the company have a very, very large role to play. Followers as well, but a little bit less, right? Because when one's influence is lower, one's responsibility is also a little bit lower.
Can we say the ESG also factors in? Maybe people monitor it.
Yeah, I think you could on multiple levels. So one, from the level of governance, right? These explicit incentives, which is the realm of game theory, but I think also at the level of morality, right? I think humans do have strong moral instincts, right? And I guess maybe to lay folks, it seems less surprising, right? But to economists, it was very surprising, her research showing that, look, I can document that this small-scale society, people could get away with almost whatever they wanted. There's almost no monitoring or governance. And yet people don't do it, and then why is that? And I can compare across different small-scale societies, and I show, well, the ones where the leaders include people in decision-making, right? Or the ones where the leaders are acting in people's best interests, or where processes seem fair and just. These are the ones where people don't go down to the lake and essentially loot the lake of all of the fish. Right? So it's everyone's responsibility. Sometimes the government's more, sometimes private sector leaders more. Leaders matter more than followers, but everybody matters in the creation of moral communities. Yeah.
How do these theories stand in times of global crisis? Like COVID recently, we experienced COVID, which is a global crisis. How does this theory?
Right. So here I think one aspect of this is the research suggests times of threat can bring out both the best and the worst in human beings and in human societies. So under conditions of threat, we tend to become more hierarchical. That can be okay if we have good leaders, right? But can be bad if we have bad leaders. I'm thinking of one of my home countries, which will go unnamed, right? That's a little bit of a dark side, if you will. However, also under conditions of crisis and threat, human beings tend to cooperate with each other more, right? And we also turn to morality more, right? And then we also tend to think actually more, not less, about the future and our ethical responsibilities. There's a very influential theory of motivation from Maslow. Maybe some of you have heard of it, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And what Maslow argued was that, well, the baseline of this pyramid of needs is, basic needs, like I need air and food, right, and shelter, things like this. And then the higher level needs are things like a desire for meaning or fulfillment or thoughts about religious values or the afterlife, etc. Right? So what the research suggests is that Maslow was absolutely right about the different kinds of needs, but he was wrong about the hierarchy. So Maslow's idea was, well, if someone doesn't have food, how could they be concerned with meaning and fulfillment? And yet what the research shows is that when people don't have food, they're more, not less concerned with meaning and fulfillment, right? And they think more, not less, about ethics and community values, right? So it's not the case that poverty and suffering reduces human beings, So what happens with rats, when you take away all the food, right, they start to eat each other and you basically have this what's called a sinkhole society, right? The rats no longer get along and no longer cooperate. That's not always what happens with human beings. So crisis can bring out the worst in humans, but it can also bring out the best. And oftentimes it makes us we become more hierarchical, but also more cooperative. Great question. The thoughts, questions? No? How am I doing on time?
Yeah, we have another 10, 15 minutes.
Oh, another 10 minutes, great. Can I do another little demonstration?
The video, yes.
Or did you, sorry?
The video is that.
Yeah, I have another little thing I'd love to do if it's all right, if I have time. Okay,
yes.
all right. Now I'm going to give you another little challenge. It's related but distinct. I'm very glad we have time for this. I'm going to click through these quickly. So I'm going to have you watch other people doing a social dilemma cooperation challenge. Now, in all of these situations, each player makes positive statements to the other side of, I'm going to be your friend and I'm going to cooperate. And then subsequently, they choose to either cooperate or to defect. Again, if they defect and the other person cooperates, they can claim abnormal value. If they both defect, they both do poorly. So it's very similar to what you just did with the oil pricing game, but now with just two players. So for each person, I want you to try to predict, are they going to be a friend, cooperate, or be a foe, compete, right? And then try to keep track in your mind for how many of the 8 people did you predict correctly? So I'll show you the first clip. Here. Oops.
Lovely kids.
Yeah, that's in this, here we go. All right, so this is Joanne versus Maria. Try to predict for Joanne and Maria, will each of them be a friend, in which case they're telling the truth, or a foe, in which case they are not. So in your head, predict for Joanne, is she a friend or a foe? And then for Maria, is she a friend or a foe? I'll later reveal who is friend and who is foe. I'll go through these very quickly. All right, so for Marcia and Doug, predict friend or foe. Now Darla and Martin.
Well, I'm going to give each of you some sacred time to make your case to your teammates, starting with you, Martin.
Well, we did a good job as a team, and my main thing is actually finance my friends to play with. So I say go with friend.
That's sweet. He's such a sweet boy. You know, the sweet boy. He was a good kid. I have 6 of my own. So, I trust your ass. You must be exhausted. All right. Well, you each had your say, and the moment of truth is at hand, so please each of you take a hand, put it inside the trust box. It's time to choose friend or foe.
All right, you choose friend or foe too. For Darla and Martin, do you think they'll cooperate or not? One more. Dan and John.
I'm going to give each of you a moment to speak your minds. John?
You gotta make a case on it. When we came in, 1100, don't leave, up in.
Friends?
Friends.
Dan?
So I know my birthday coming up. I came here for main reason. It's her birthday, and I guess money for her. So
Well, she's cute, but does that mean you want all the money? All 22?
I'm just gonna get something that's a birthday party. Jeez.
You both have your say, and now it's time for each of you to slip a hand inside the trust box. It's time to choose friend or foe.
All right, so that's all 8 targets. Now I'll show the reveal. So in your head, score yourself for how many of the 8 targets did you make the correct prediction of friend or foe. These are quite short.
So, Joanne, let's find out if you're a friend or foe. And you, like a friend, that means you took a big risk. Either you're taking home $4,100 or you've just handed Maria $8,200 on a platter. Maria, let's find out what you picked, friend or foe. You got both on friend and foe.
All right, so keep track in your head. How many did you get right? Now Marcia and Doug.
You guys decided to do with it. You went friend and you went foe. That means Doug is taking home all the money. Let's find out if you're a friend or a foe, Darla. You went friend. That means either you're getting $2,850 or you put a little too much faith in Martin and he's getting $5,700. Only foe knows. And Martin, you went.
Those poor kids. Last one.
Let's see what you guys have decided to do with the money.
All right, so they both picked foe, and they both got nothing. So by show of hands, how many picked correctly for all 8 targets? Nobody? 7? 7? Oh, 7. Wow. We have some near human lie detectors. 6? 6? No, or not quite good too. 5? 5. More hands. 4? Yeah, quite a few 4s. 3? Oh, a lot of 3s. 2? 2. 1?
So
No, yeah, absolutely. So here there's a matter of there's different undesirable options, right? So it also depends on how high up you are in the organization. So if you choose to stay and be a change agent, you could all people have a good amount of power over their immediate coworkers, right? So you can create that positive microclimate within the organization, but Yeah, at least, but the culture of the organization is going to be more the broader culture than that within that little bubble, right? So it might not be tenable in the long term, or you might be dealing with a lot of unwanted or stressful situations. I do think it's good, it's laudable, it's admirable to be a change agent for positive change. But at the same time, you also have an ethical responsibility to look after yourself and your own well-being as well. Right? So I also wouldn't look down on an employee who feels, well, what's going on in this organization is terrible and I don't have the power to change it, therefore I want to exercise my option to go to a place that's a better fit for me. I think both of those are understandable and defensible approaches.
That would help let's say, a small influencer or a tiny leader within a company that he could do or she could do to improve, let's say, the social work and improve the environment within the tiny. So just one hint. The
thing that you have the most power over is, I think, whatever level that you're at, is fair processes. So either fair processes within a team or fair processes within a broader organization will tend to promote a culture of pro-sociality, right? So that means being impartial, right? Having a process that's transparent and that has people's buy-in from the beginning.
Yeah, make it clear from the beginning.
That's right, right. Clarity and transparency, but fairness, especially at a process level. What the research on people's perceptions of justice in organizations shows is that people do care about what's called distributive justice. Did everybody get the amount that they ought to get? But they care even more about process-based justice. So people will accept the result that's really not very good for them. I didn't get the bonus that I wanted, or I didn't get the promotion that I wanted, if they feel that the process through which we came to that result was something fair. Right? And so that's a point where you do have the ability to be a positive change agent. Say, if you're a team leader, you can make things fair within your team. You do have the power for that, although you might still be fighting against a broader unfair processes or unfair allocations of resources and processes to distribute those resources in the broader organization. But I would say fairness is the most powerful tool. Using a whistleblower approach, so you essentially.
When you can't reach out to your higher management or to the people on صوتي وايد عالي.
I would say generally pro, right? Although this asks a lot of the whistleblower, right? So the reasons that a lot of folks don't blow the whistle is that usually there's a strong disincentive not to do so. You risk a lot and you don't gain much yourself, right? You risk being targeted for retaliation and being pushed out of the organization. There's lots of very scary statistics on this, right? But I would say one way that a lower power but highly informed individual can be a part of increasing the governance system is by reporting it to the authorities. I mean, they can't do their job if they don't know, and no one is better positioned to expose poor behavior than someone who is an insider who doesn't agree with what's going on. So, so I would say, I would need to hear the specific scenario, right?
Yeah, make a judgment, a fair judgment.
There's definitely been some very bad whistleblower scenarios in history, right? So denunciation doesn't always have there's been some terrible forms of whistleblowing, but if the behavior is genuinely poor, I think one way that a low-power person can make a big contribution is alerting the authorities to genuinely, seriously unethical behavior in the organization. Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
You've mentioned that Maslow's hierarchy had been somewhat not in the right order. Is there anything that's considered an update to Cotter's model of change? Cotter's model of change?
Cotter's model of change? No, I would say that this is still a well-respected.
It's still, all right.
This is a well-respected model, and things like S-curves of change are still taught in business schools around the world. Yeah, but I think Maslow's hierarchy is brilliant. It's intuitive. I should also be fair to Maslow. Some of his hypotheses have been supported, right? So, for example, individuals who are in conditions of great scarcity, so they don't have enough resources, tend to play win-lose in negotiation more, so they're more competitive rather than trying to create value, right? But this is often because their time horizon is a little bit short, right? Okay. But Maslow was wrong that individuals who lack the fulfillment of basic needs like food, for example, turn away from deeper needs like meaning and fulfillment, right? You know, one obvious example would be religiosity. Religious passion is much greater among folks who are less wealthy. Right. Right.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor
A huge
Eric,
pleasure.
for that. And I apologize for pushing you in the beginning
No
because
worries,
I was
no
afraid
worries.
that we're going to run out of time.
No worries, no worries.
Thank-
I don't think I told you beforehand there weren't really going to be 11 rounds.
Yeah, I was scared too when I saw the screen
I
at
always
11.
I do 2 or 3. So the reason not to tell people there's 2 is that everybody will then defect on 2, right? Because the game's over.
Okay. Then you got me on that. Thank you so much. مشكورين الحضور. Again, thank you for the very informative and interactive session.
Huge pleasure.
Thank you
Thank you so much for your time and for being here and for all your questions. If you have an individual question I did not get to, please stay after the talk. I'm happy to do my best to address it.
Thank you so much.